Hi everybody, and welcome back to Hello, It's Best to Talk. Now today I'm incredibly delighted to tell you that Andy Coley is going to be sharing with us his story, his life story, and he is on the planet at the moment, as you can see. In all
I'm definitely, I've checked and everything.
That's right. We had a sound check beforehand. But Andy is now a very successful NLP trainer and coach and helps a lot of people. But he had a bad time. He had a dark time, a time when life was very dark. And Andy, you've agreed that you're going to share what happened then, because I think it's, we were having a little chat before this all started, and I think that whole, about the whole thing about what happens when life is really dark and you feel trapped and you feel like you have the options and what you do. And we probably, all of us have been through a dark phase like that, but not perhaps sunk as low as you did. So can you tell us what happened, Andy? And
thanks for the opportunity to come on here. Like you say, it's the whole thing about talking more about mental health, about I guess some of the stuff we just hang on to and don't really share is always a good opportunity to kind of come on and I guess share inspiration, share stories with people, because I'm sure we all have very similar journeys that we go through as well. So happily sort of good childhood, went to uni, went to school, uni, all the rest of it. Fairly uneventful childhood. I was always a sort of outdoorsy, scouty, doing type of guy. And was on my life plan. Going into my 20s, I'd gone to uni, got a job, worked at Goldman Sachs, up in the city doing IT. I used to be an IT geek, so I spent most of my sort of early sort of 20s and into my early 30s doing IT and web design. And kind of, my life plan, doing what my parents did, meeting somebody in my early 20s, getting married, thinking, get the house, know what I'm doing, go on my holidays. Everything was sort of seemed to be going okay. And at the same time, things weren't necessarily great. I wasn't a great communicator. I often talk about this on workshops. My conflict style was an avoider, because I've been raised with the family rug of all the things you don't talk about. We don't talk about why that happened in the family. We won't all talk about this thing. We just kind of bury our head and it will go away. And that's partly, I guess, the model that I got raised with in terms of dealing with conflict, dealing with situations that were tricky. And I just didn't have the emotional intelligence. I never really had coaching. I didn't know anything about mindset stuff, NLP, and hadn't heard of any of that stuff really. Therapy was what other people had, and I hung on to a lot of stuff. So as things started getting tricky in my marriage, I wasn't really communicating. I managed to get myself into a lot of debt. And part of it was my, I guess, now I look back on it, it's sort of really toxic masculinity thing. I'm the man, I'm the provider, my job's not going so well, but we can still go on holiday. Your job's not going so well, to my first wife, and so it's okay, leave it. You don't have to be there. I can manage. And I was just getting myself more and more into debt as my career wasn't working out so well. I was working for myself, and things spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. We borrowed money against the house. I put money on cards, and it's just stuff that she didn't even know about existed. And I got myself into 30, 40, 50Ks worth of debt, plus the mortgage. So probably it was at least 100Ks worth of debt that I'd sort of racked up in one way or another. And I'd love to say it was on horses or gambling or, cryptocurrency didn't exist, but it's like, I'd love to say I'd spent it on something, but it wasn't. It was just on living, on life, on basically replacing what I wasn't bringing in by being self-employed and failing, in business, as I saw it at the time. And I made some bad decisions. I did some bad business, setups, and had companies that also went bust that I'd put money into, and all these kind of things had happened. And I wasn't sharing my emotions. I wasn't sharing what was really going on. I didn't have, I guess, the emotional capacity to talk. And talking was the last thing I was doing. I wasn't sharing it with my friends. I wasn't sharing it with my wife. I wasn't sharing it with my family. And I was hanging on to all this stuff until one day the lid popped off, because I was a great liar. I was a great person at covering things up. It's all okay. Don't worry about the debt. And I've got myself, I don't know if maybe any of the people watching have ever gotten into this spiral. But I had so little money at one point that I would pay a credit card, maybe put £200-300 on the credit card. The day that I knew that transaction had gone in, I'd then go to the cash point. I'd take cash out from that credit card, put it back into my bank to pay for something else. And I was living life like that. I was even leaving the house from jobs that I was doing at lunchtime to go home to intercept the post on the day that I knew the statements were coming from the bank so my wife wouldn't see them. Like, that's the life I was living. It's very much in constant like anxiety mode, about being found out, about this I can handle everything. I'm the man, I can provide, and that actually suddenly somebody would recognize that wasn't true. I couldn't go out and hunt the deer. Do you know what? I was actually going and buying it on a credit card around the corner from Sainsbury's, and then dragging it home and pretending I'd bought it. It was kind of, I got myself caught up in that bullshit, basically.
So what changed when things changed, Andy?
Well, the thing that really, I guess, popped the lid off the relationship was she found out about it. So she found out about the debt, and it all came out, and like how much it was, and went to my parents, and my parents supported me. And actually, my dad spent his pension from the Navy in order for me to pay off the debts, and that helped. That was about 7 years into our marriage, and that really helped. And then at the same time, one of our best friends died. She was about 2 weeks away from giving birth. And the baby she got streptococcal, that killed the baby, and then it killed her. So we lost her and the baby. It was only a month or so after all this stuff with the money had been sorted out and there. So I got my wife, who needed support. It was primarily her friend, but it was also our friend. And she also hated my guts, hated me, hated the situation. And we sort of, guess went on by for a few years. We tried some counselling, we tried to get some support, but we moved house. We had our makeup house, and hope that change of environment. I'm sure we will be through that. But change the environment, everything will be magically okay, and it wasn't. It wasn't okay. And it got to the point when I was about 33 years old. It's about 12 years or so ago now, and just this overwhelming weight of I'm a failure. I failed at my businesses. I failed at my life. I failed at my marriage. I failed at my friends. I'm a failure. And just that overwhelming, I was just avoiding being in the house. We were separate bedrooms by this point. We just knew that the marriage was over, but neither of us wanted to admit like that last step of let's split up and let's get divorced. And I remember driving along country lane one night. We lived sort of a little bit outside in the country near Portsmouth, and just driving along that road, and it was a sort of November, horrible, crappy, night. It was a bit wet, all that kind of stuff, and just driving back to the house that I lived in that wasn't a home anymore. Just thinking, you know what? I don't even know if I want to be here. And I remember thinking, right, I could just accelerate down here now, and just take the car off the road and just ram it into a tree. Done. And all the crap would just be over. And the thing that stopped me was my mind went to my funeral and how let down my family would be because I hadn't asked for help, because I hadn't taken that step, to do something about it. And it was that guilt about how let down my family would be that actually stopped me from taking my own life, from committing suicide, because I really got to that point where I just felt like there was nothing else to do. There's no other way out of the situation.
So you had a kind of feeling of being trapped in.
Yeah. I was just trapped by the failure of this identity that I built, of this perception of what a perfect marriage, a perfect life, a perfect career. I was trapped by all of the things that I perceived I was supposed to have had that I'd failed at getting.
You had a kind of all the trappings, but inside you were trapped.
Yeah, well, I had the paper facade of all the trappings, but it wasn't built on any foundation, on anything that was strong. And when there had been some strength, other things had undermined it and come along and really sort of knocked the wind out of our sails. So we'd never had a chance to kind of rebuild the strength as well. And so we sort of had that conversation in November, and my ex had said, look, go to the doctors. You're obviously depressed. Go and get some help. Go and get some support. So I went to the doctor, got put on some antidepressants because I just kept having like such toxic conversations going on in my own head, of all the things. It just wouldn't shut up. I couldn't sleep. I was trying sleep hypnosis tracks. I was trying all sorts of stuff, alcohol, just like anything I could to just try and blot out, the voices and the disappointment going on in my head. And thankfully the medication really helped. It just helped to just soften everything down and just give me the chance to do a bit of a reset. And a couple of months later, we were sort of talking about, right, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Let's call it, whilst we're still talking to each other, whilst we're still friendly, but not friends, let's just call it a day, And nobody else in my family has ever gotten divorced, of carrying that, and nobody else has.
Stigma for that, isn't there?
So all that, well, there wasn't, but in me there was, because it's not the family unit. It's not the, I was raised, from family in the West Country. You do your work, you retire, etc. That's life. That's the life that you're in. And so we split up, and I moved back home with my parents at 30, just coming up for sort of 34, 35 years old. And I moved back home with my mum and dad, back into my old family bedroom. And I was starting to listen to personal development stuff, Tony Robbins CDs. I don't know if you know the Holstein Manifesto, This Is My Life, that poster. I love that poster. I bought that and put that on my wall. So every time when I woke up in the morning, I had that in front of me. I was starting to pay a bit more attention to my own personal development as well. But at this time, not only was my career kind of limping along, I was doing okay working for myself as doing web design, but I was really burnt out from just all the effort and all the stress and all the stuff. But once I moved back home, my parents actually, do you know what? It felt like a relief. Like the decision had been made. Right, we're doing this. I've now got the time back for myself. What do I do next? And I was also 23 stone in weight, 142 kilos for anybody watching in America. So I was really overweight and really unhealthy and really unfit. And I had a friend of mine who was a master practitioner of NLP. And I know a lot of you, like when you're in Overland, like where do I start? Like every area of my life. If I did a life wheel, they'd all be very low numbers. Because it just felt like really, I'd starting from scratch again. So we picked health, and health was an area that I started to pay attention to. That was the area where I wanted to kind of do something about it first, because I had all this time back. I was newly single. I thought, what can I do with my health? I wasn't interested in long-term relationships. I was just, my first wife was the, only person I ever dated, the only person, I'd ever sort of, had sex with and be like, I didn't know anything else. That was the person that I'd kind of, met and married, and this like, sort of starting again was such an interesting journey. So I started to pay attention to my health, and in 9 months I lost 6.5 stone in weight, 32 kilos.
Wow.
Because I've been very sedentary, I hadn't been paying attention to nutrition, and suddenly I started finding out more about how I tick. For ages I've been trying to lose weight, but actually, thanks to knowing about NLP and how you tick, what I needed to do was gain health. And so by switching my mindset around, by switching things about, and suddenly paying attention to the things that are important to me, getting motivated, and having a sense of purpose again, because I'd lost my purpose, I'd lost my drive, I'd lost my mojo, basically. And by reconnecting with that, then suddenly, I was going to the classes. Like nothing was stopping there. They were the most important thing in my diary, and I had all this time to go and do them. And I found a new community, a new set of friends. I met this really fantastic guy called Topsy who ran these boot camps, and just got really involved. I was doing, gradually 5K races, 10K races. I even did a triathlon 6 or 7 years ago. Wow. And suddenly got enthused about that. And because I was, I guess, being that before and after shot, you sort of kind of see, I thought, wow, how does this work? For me, then getting to know more about NLP was kind of where I picked that up from next.
Okay, good. So basically you started with yourself, because I think that's it. In a way, there was a big change from you got all the trappings, all the things that you thought you needed, the marriage, the cars, the house, the holidays, and so on, and that all fell away. And then you started back with yourself, and started to be kinder with yourself, and starting to see what you could gain in terms of health, rather than what, another loss of giving up weight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what? So tell us what happened. After that. What? So yeah.
Well, so I was working for myself, still doing web development, web design, and still sort of had some clients that I kept hold of that were sort of fulfilling me on a sort of monthly basis. I still had the debt. I'd paid back most of the money to my parents. My dad had Parkinson's, so he was getting, I guess, frailer because of that, and he was only in his just coming up for 60 at the time. My parents moved back down to the West Country. So when they moved down there, I stayed on the South Coast in the area and started to focus on a career doing coaching and NLP, because by this time I'd become 2012, I did my NLP training. So having been coached through it, I suddenly got fascinated about doing it. I went along to an intro day and just thought, I really want to coach and support people. I so valued having that done with me. I want to do that with other people. And then by the second day, I thought, you look like you're having a lot of fun up there on the stage. So actually, I want to be an NLP trainer. And so I did my NLP training, my practitioner, my master's, and my trainer's training in 1 year.
Wow.
And
you were motoring.
Yeah, because again, I had the time, I had the space. I rang up my mum and dad and said, look, if I don't pay you rent for a year, is that okay? Because I want to invest in this training. And they were like, okay, we see see what it's done for you. We see the value of it. Yeah, okay, go for it. Spend that money, spend that 10K basically on yourself again. And again, I wouldn't be, anywhere where I am, or I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their support and their love. Ever since that, NLP has been what I've evolved into. So now, fast forward a few years, obviously sorting out business, doing NLP, realigning in terms of money and debt. Still have some of that historic stuff kicking around, but that's just getting itself paid off as and when. I've been very lucky. I met Sophie, who's my wife now. We met 6 years ago. We got married 5 years ago, and she's a hypnobirthing teacher. And we have a very different relationship. It's much more open. The communication is much. I've done a lot of the work, although I still notice some of the old patterns of, I don't really want to talk about this, but I know that I can work my way through it. And so suddenly when I met Sophie, I became a stepdad. And I suddenly recognized that family were important to me. I did values around my relationships. I suddenly recognized, do you know what, I do want a family. So, we're geriatric parents, because we also have had 2 girls since then, both born at our last house. One was in the bathroom, just myself and my wife, no midwives around.
Wonderful.
And the second one, Beatrice, she came along just nearly 2 years ago, also born at home in Nepal. And so, becoming a parent, again, you notice your patterns coming up. I noticed myself saying the stuff my parents would say, going, hang on a minute, do I believe that now? Do I want to let go of some of that stuff that I recognize about myself? Is that really true? Is that who I am? And also successfully training NLP programs since then. I've trained nearly 300 people as practitioners, nearly 100 people as master practitioners. And I coach and support organizations and businesses and people all the time through the process of change. And understanding what those limiting beliefs are, what are the things that are holding them back, what are the voices, what are the expressions, what are the sayings you've been given that actually become your own voice but needn't be, is part of, I guess, a lot of the untangling that I do with the people that I support. Be it just because they watch videos like this and suddenly go and have time to reflect on who they are and how they are, or because they come along to a workshop or do a training around it. And for me, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, has really been the difference that made the difference in terms of my mindset. And getting to understand how your mind changes and the neuroscience behind how your mind changes, and the effectiveness of doing that, and that it can be permanent and not just a sort of magic thing that lasts for 5 minutes. For me, that's been such an evolution, such a process. And now at the age of 45, with the 3 kids and the family and the businesses and all the work that I'm doing to kind of work on myself, we're all works in progress. I get coached regularly by people that support me. I have off days. We were talking about this just before we came online. We have days where
we all do.
You know what? Yeah,
absolutely. It's not like it's binary, is it? So you're not like
Yeah.
either you're well or you're ill. I mean, we have great days, we have not so great days, you know.
Yeah.
Life chucks a load of stuff at us, and yet we gain resilience in dealing with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm really fascinated in this sort of whole idea about what that inner voice is telling you, because if you've got an inner voice that's telling you you're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure, then, you know, where do you go with that? And so,
well, often
kind of
it's it's asking it questions. So how specifically am I a failure? Like, what's your evidence about the failure? Because our brains generalize. You know, we say, oh, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, this happens to me all the time, every time I try and do this happens. And so actually argue with your own voice, like, ask it questions for which you want to know the answers to get down into specifics, because more often than not, it hasn't happened all the time. It probably happened once, and we've internally blown it out of all proportion. So get to question where some of these beliefs have come from, and then go, actually, do I believe this? Was this something that was installed with me at school? Is this actually something that was a mantra that my parents would say? Is this something that society says that men have to be the providers? Or, you know, if you pick something up along the way, you know, is it your faith that was given, you know, to you when maybe you went to church at an early age but now don't? You know, it's all those kind of things that create those internal value sets that we, because, you know, when we grow up, when we're modeling, I watch this with my kids. I'm giving my kids my values, yeah, consciously or unconsciously, in my actions and what I'm doing and how I react and what I say. I'm giving them my opinion. I'm giving them my purpose. So of course they're modeling that. Now, as we get older and we evolve and we start to question, yeah, our parents and their values, and, you know, then we get influences, and we, you know, get older and we get, you know, pubescence and all those kind of things, and then we suddenly actually recognize, do I want to keep this or do I want to let it go? It's like being given this thing you've got to carry with you for the whole life, and at some point you go, do you know what? I don't need to take this big bit of baggage along with me anymore. I can just let that bit go. In fact, I could empty it and turn it into some luggage and put some useful stuff in there instead. You know, and it's just recognizing all of that is a choice. And either something has to be so amazing that you want to go for it, yeah, and that nothing will stop you from going for it, or it has to get so bad that also creates some momentum for change. And for me, that had enough moment of deciding on that road as to whether or not I was going to still be here or not, was the momentum that I needed to go, yes, I do still want to be here. You know, yes, I do want to change, and then doing something about it. And yeah, and it's doing it, you know, or thinking about it in a way without things having to get that bad. You can imagine what they could get like if you continue along this path. You can imagine what it'd be like if you didn't change a habit, you know. And that in and of itself can create enough momentum to allow you to start to shift and change, and then get support. You know, I am a thinker talker, right? So I haven't prepared, there's no script, I'm thinking as I'm talking. So for me, the whole process of talking actually enables me to get my thoughts out. That's why I love coaching, love getting support. That doesn't have to be formal coaching. That could be chatting to a friend, or chatting to, you know, people that I'm working with, chatting to my wife. You know, that whole process. Because when I hold on to stuff, it doesn't do myself any service, because I'm my own worst enemy. I only know what I know. Whereas when I verbalize it, I step away from it, I share it, I put it into the world, and I go, do you know what? That just sounds like a whole load of tosh to me. I don't even believe what I'm saying, let alone anybody else. And sometimes by verbalizing it or writing it down or journaling or whatever is your bag, often just get it out your head, get it into the world, and then you can kind of step away from something and decide, right, what do I want to do about it? What would I like to have happen instead? And constantly putting yourself into what you want rather than what you don't want. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole thing about verbalizing, talking about it, which can include journaling, just as you say, is incredibly it's vital. We learn through talking, don't we? We learn through talking to ourselves, and also, you know, getting out of your head and that negative stuff. Andy, so that's fantastic. Thank you. You know, thank you for your bravery and your honesty and sharing what happened, because I'm sure there'll be lots of people who watch who will relate to that.
Yeah.
And as we share our stories, and we share our inspirational stories, you know, we can kind of we learn from other people, don't we? All the time we learn from the kind of modeling. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. So we'll drop down on below how to get hold of Andy and his wonderful training and coaching and that support that he can offer you. And is there anything that you'd like to finish up with, and Andy, a message to people?
Just remember, as BT used to say, it's good to talk. Just remember, share. Just find somebody, even if it's a stranger, like somebody who doesn't know you, who isn't involved in your stuff. That's why getting support, getting coaching, just ring up. Anything you've got access to, if you've got access to it at work, access to it through some kind of insurance program, access to it because you're fortunate enough to be able to pay for it. Whatever it is, just talk to somebody who's able to hold some space for you to explore what's happening, because you have the answers within you to make the changes that you need. You don't need to be told what to do. In fact, if somebody tells you what to do, you go, yeah, whatever. You don't know my life. The most important thing is that the change has to come from within you, because then you're far more likely to do it. So whatever you do and however you do it, whether or not you've got a friend who's your go-to person who's a great listener, or somebody who's got some skill set to be able to support you, do talk about it, because by talking about it, it really allows you to get some perspective on it. And then when you've got the perspective, you can decide what to do next. So yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, that's right. I mean, BT said it's good to talk. We say here, it's better to talk.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Andy, thank you so much for being on the channel, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week on Wednesday at noon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.